Well, greetings, future social workers, and welcome back to Case Management 535. This is a special lecture for you all. I'm sure you know that for obvious reasons, right? This is our last lecture for the term. And so I just want to say that you all have been fantastic this semester. I want to say thank you for all the work that you've put into this class. I know that it wasn't always easy, but you have stuck with it and you have persevered, and now you are at the end of your journey. As many of you know, if you've had courses with me before, you know that I like to spend the last class reflecting. And I like to do a couple of activities. Those activities are meant to really spend time engaged in a process of self-reflection about why you are choosing not only to pursue social work, but how it relates to that particular course that you're taking, in this case, case management. And so for today's lecture, which will be brief, we only have two things on the docket for today. We are going to watch a video from a professional that had a profound impact on my development as a social worker, but also I believe just as a professional, as a human being. And then what we are going to do is spend some time reflecting on how those messages from this particular individual pertain to you, to case management, and to your future careers. So I look forward to today's lecture, and without further ado, we will go ahead and dive in and get started. So I'm going to bring up our material for today. And like I said, this is our course wrap-up, right? I think that a lot of times transitions are already difficult enough. Transitions for students, at least from what I can remember in my past, wasn't always easy, right? There were some courses you were super glad to be leaving behind. Maybe this is one of those courses. But transition for students is difficult because you're tired. You're balancing what is going on in your personal life and your work life with your school, with practicum. And on top of that, you just have a ton of assignments due. It's a transition of seasons. And so life can seem heavy. I think it's easy at times to push aside the self-reflection and continue to press on with all the other things that we have to do with our to-do list. But I caution us in those moments that if we don't take time to deliberately stop and reflect upon the journey that we've had, remember that pale blue analogy that I made in this course about turning the camera around and looking back on how far we've come, then I think it's a little disheartening because you don't get to pat yourself on the back and experience that sense of accomplishment for the journey that you've committed to and that you've already made. This is a huge step, okay? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and dive into the content for today. In this course, I've focused on two things, right? Since the beginning of this course, I've emphasized that case management and that social work in general is a balance between the head and the heart, and that the head and the heart are equally important in your future careers to fulfilling the obligations, utilizing the skill sets that you've been given during your master's program. And so for today, I'm going to focus on the heart. The last 14 weeks or so have been focused on the head, right? We've talked about documentation and the GEM model. We've talked about SBIRT. We've talked about documentation training. Right? We've talked about building relationships and rapport and strengths and transition and court hearings and all of this good stuff. At the end of the day, you can be a great technical social worker, but if you're lacking heart, if you're lacking empathy, your professional journey will be much more difficult, not only for you, but also for the clients that you're encountering. And so I want to end today's lesson with a focus on the heart. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to watch a video from Rita Pearson. Rita Pearson was a phenomenal educator who had a profound impact on my learning process. And as many of you know that I was a school counselor for a short period of time. I also have a PPS credential and worked at a high school over in Moreno Valley and absolutely loved it. Rita Pearson is big in the education arena, similar to how Dr. Brene Brown is huge in social work and in research related to vulnerability, right? But Rita Pierson's message, I truly believe, crosses over into many different professions. Rita Pierson's message at the core of this is relationship. And so she talks about being a great educator, and she talks about doing all the things that an educator does that makes them great in the technical sense of what they do. But Rita Pierson also drives home at the point of what makes a great educator is also the heart and the attitude that you bring to your role every single day. And so that's what I want to bring to you for your final message today. I'd like you to watch this famous TED Talk, okay? This is probably one of the most well-known TED Talks that Rita Pierson has delivered. She passed away in 2013 at the age of 61, but her message still continues, I think, to permeate into the fields of education and human services in general. And so let's watch this video very quickly from Rita. And then what we will do is we're going to drive home this message and relate it to the time that you spent here in case management and what this all means for your future career. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. Let's jump into YouTube. Let me move my face out of the way and we shall commence.
I have spent my entire life either at the schoolhouse, on the way to the schoolhouse, or talking about what happens in the schoolhouse. Both my parents were educators. My maternal grandparents were educators. And for the past 40 years, I've done the same thing. And so needless to say, over those years, I've had a chance to look at education reform from a lot of perspectives. Some of those reforms have been good, some of them have been not so good. And we know why kids drop out. We know why kids don't learn. It's either poverty, low attendance, negative peer influences. We know why. But one of the things that we never discuss, or we rarely discuss, is the value and importance of human connection. Relationships. James Comer says that no significant learning can occur without a significant relationship. George Washington Carver says all learning is understanding relationships. Everyone in this room has been affected by a teacher or an adult. For years, I have watched people teach. I have looked at the best and I've looked at some of the worst. A colleague said to me one time, they don't pay me to like the kids. They pay me to teach a lesson, the kids should learn it, I should teach it, they should learn it, case closed. Well, I said to her, you know, kids don't learn from people they don't like. She said, that's just a bunch of hooey. And I said to her, well, your year is gonna be long and arduous, dear. Needless to say, it was. Some people think that you can either have it in you to build a relationship or you don't. I think Stephen Covey had the right idea. He said you ought to just throw in a few simple things, like seeking first to understand as opposed to being understood. Simple things like apologizing. You ever thought about that? Tell a kid you're sorry, they're in shock. I taught a lesson once on ratios. I'm not real good with math, but I was working on it. And I got back and looked at that teacher edition. I taught the whole lesson wrong. So I came back to class the next day and I said, look, guys, I need to apologize. I taught the whole lesson wrong. I'm so sorry. They said, that's okay, Miss Pearson. You were so excited. We just let you go. I have had classes that were so low, so academically deficient that I cried. I wondered, how am I going to take this group in 9 months from where they are to where they need to be? And it was difficult. It was awfully hard. How do I raise the self-esteem of a child and his academic achievement at the same time? One year I came up with a bright idea. I told all my students, you were chosen to be in my class. Because I am the best teacher and you are the best students, they put us all together so we could show everybody else how to do it. One of the students said, really? I said, really? We have to show the other classes how to do it. So when we walk down the hall, people will notice us. So you can't make noise, you just have to strut. And I gave him a saying to say, I am somebody. I was somebody when I came. I'll be a better somebody when I leave. I am powerful and I am strong. I deserve the education that I get here. I have things to do, people to impress, and places to go. And they said, yeah. You say it long enough, it starts to be a part of you. And so, I gave a quiz, 20 questions. Student missed 18. I put a +2 on this paper and a big smiley face. He said, Miss Pearson, is this an F? I said, yes. He said, then why'd you put a smiley face? I said, because you on the roll. You got 2 right, you didn't miss them all. I said, and when we review this, won't you do better? He said, yes, ma'am, I can do better. You see, -18 sucks all the life out of you. +2 said, I ain't all bad. For years, I watched my mother take the time at recess to review, go on home visits in the afternoon, buy combs and brushes and peanut butter and crackers to put in her desk drawer for kids that needed to eat, and a washcloth and some soap for the kids who didn't smell so good. See, it's hard to teach kids who stink. And kids can be cruel. And so she kept those things in her desk, and years later, after she retired, I watched some of those same kids come through and say to her, you know, Miss Walker, you made a difference in my life. You made it work for me. You made me feel like I was somebody when I knew at the bottom I wasn't. And I want you to just see what I've become. And when my mama died 2 years ago at 92, there were so many former students at her funeral. It brought tears to my eyes, not because she was gone, but because she left a legacy of relationships that could never disappear. Can we stand to have more relationships? Absolutely. Will you like all your children? Of course not. And you know your toughest kids are never absent. Never. You won't like them all, and the tough ones show up for a reason. It's the connection, it's the relationships. And while you won't like them all, the key is they can never, ever know it. So teachers become great actors and great actresses, and we come to work when we don't feel like it, and we listen to policy that doesn't make sense, and we teach anyway. We teach anyway because that's what we do. Teaching and learning should bring joy. How powerful would our world be if we had kids who were not afraid to take risks, who were not afraid to think, and who had a champion? Every child deserves a champion, an adult who will never give up on them, who understands the power of connection and insists that they become the best that they can possibly be. Is this job tough? You betcha. Oh God, you betcha. But it is not impossible. We can do this. We're educators. We're born to make a difference. Thank you so much.
Okay. I hope you found that TED Talk as wonderful as I do. I truly enjoy any opportunity that I had to learn from Rita Pearson, to watch any of her materials, to hear her speak. So fundamental in the development of how I came to view my work, which I also believe is a calling, right? So let's unpack a little bit of Rita's message here. Let's apply Rita's message to social work for a second, right? So Rita was talking as an educator, but like I said, what I've come to learn about Rita's message is there's a profound emphasis central to relationships. And I've always said that in social work, relationships come first. That's the primary goal of a social worker, is to establish a relationship, because everything else will come with that. And so Relationships, as Rita said, they come first, right? All learning is understanding relationships. All learning comes from the notion of understanding our relationship with one another and our relationship with the world around us. Everyone is affected by a teacher or an adult. At times, a social worker, you will be that voice, that impact, that individual who impacts that child, that client, right? More than anyone else in their lives. Clients won't grow from people they don't like. Think about that, right? You've got to have clients begin to trust you, begin to establish a meaningful relationship with you if they are going to listen to you. We know that in our own lives. People that we don't like, chances are we're not in a position to grow from anything they have to offer. And so relationship comes first. Seek first to understand as opposed to be understood. This requires humility. This requires a notion of self-reflection and awareness as we can seek to understand first, to understand the perspective of another, then we are in a unique position to build relationships with others. Apologize to your clients. I can't tell you how many times I've learned and made significant headway with clients from simply saying, I'm sorry. Right? I'm sorry that I got that wrong. I'm sorry that I made that mistake. I'm going to go back and fix that. I'm sorry, it wasn't my intent, right, to make you feel a certain way. How can I prevent from doing that in the future? I'm sorry I'm running 10 minutes late for my meeting. I know it doesn't happen often, but your time is valuable and I want to apologize for not respecting your time, right? These are things that you can use to gather, to gain a relationship with a client. You will wonder how to take a client from where they are to where they need to be. There's times where I've sat and I've read the intake packet for my client and I've thought to myself, how am I going to do this? Right? I don't have a magic wand. I'm a person and I'm responsible for taking this client from where they are to where they need to be. And I almost felt in that sense a moment of overwhelm. Now you can lean on your faith, you can lean on your colleagues, you can lean on the resources, the training and the education that you've been given, but you will encounter those moments where you wonder, how am I going to get my client from point A to point B? It's going to be hard. That's why they call it social work, right? Social work doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. It doesn't mean that it's going to be convenient. Right? It doesn't even mean at times that you are going to feel like you know what you're doing, to be quite honest. It's going to be hard. But I've learned, and genuinely I've stayed in this field because the successes that I have experienced as a social worker have been more profound than the other successes that I've experienced in my own personal life. And so that is what keeps me coming back to this career. Teach your clients that they are somebody. And you know, Rita said, you say it long enough, it starts to feel like it's a part of you. Sometimes our words need to contradict our attitude. Sometimes our attitude is pulling us down. Our attitude is negative or burnt or lost, right? Or hurt. And sometimes we need to speak hope into the hearts of our clients and to ourselves. And so you teach your clients they are somebody. You are responsible for role modeling success and optimism for your clients, right? You are a drum major for your clients to move forward, to have hope, to press on, to persevere in their goals. It ain't all bad, right? And so Rita Pearson used that analogy of that grade to be able to say, to emphasize one, to her kiddo, that he was somebody. But second, to say, it ain't all bad, right? Sometimes we can look at the glass that's half full or empty, right? And the times what we need to do is reframe that for our clients. What legacy of relationships will you leave behind? Rita said something very profound in this TED Talk. She talked about the notion that when her mother passed, she didn't need to mourn for her mother because she had left a legacy behind her, that all of her previous students had shown up and shown support for the impact that her mother had on their lives. And so therefore, the passing of Rita's mother was a little less painful because she knew that she still wasn't gone. There was a legacy that was left in her wake. So I'd ask you to consider, what is your legacy that you plan on leaving behind throughout your career, and will your day-to-day actions reflect that legacy that you're trying to build? You won't like them all. There's been times where, for whatever reason, your clients will just genuinely not like you, and at times, I'm going to go ahead and say the truth here, is that you may not like them, but we have a responsibility to never let them know that. we have a responsibility to still honor the dignity of that individual. So yes, they may do things that irritate you. They may do things that you don't like. But ultimately, as Christians, we are called to love that individual because they are still a child of God, made in God's image. And that's important for us to uphold, particularly in our work as social workers. The tough ones, they're going to show up for relationships. There's going to be times where you're praying that a client cancels a meeting with you. You're hoping that's the one client that cancels, and yet that's the one that shows up every week. The fact that they are showing up every week means that they're searching for something, or there's a speck of potential there for a relationship with you. It's our duty to, there's a saying that says, water what you want to see grow. And so if you see a seed planted in a client, even the toughest client that continues to show up, it's our responsibility to nurture and to water that seed to develop the relationship. Social workers show up to work even when they don't feel like it, and they listen to policy they don't agree with, and they work for clients anyway, right? So Rita Pearson says you move on, you press forward even when the circumstances dictate confusion, even when the circumstances dictate disagreement. You're still there for your client. Now, the one piece that I would add to this comment is, in particular in social work, when there's a policy that we don't agree with, social workers, we advocate to change that policy. We advocate to change the system when the system is failing a client, a population, an individual. Social work should bring joy, right? And so I've talked about some of the challenges of social work in this term. I wouldn't stay in a field, I wouldn't stay in a job if it wasn't bringing me joy. And so there's a notion of, though, is that joy isn't going to come to your front door and make everything better for you, right? We aren't promised in life that things will be easy. We have to look for joy. We have to search for joy. And when we find joy in our work, it's up to us to celebrate it and to honor it, okay? Your job is difficult, but no, it is not impossible. Don't allow the feeling of overwhelm to transfer into a thought that nothing is possible with the clients that you're doing. Everything is possible, right? Because we're not doing social work alone. We're doing it in God's presence. And you were born to make a difference. If you have stayed this long in the social work program, you have continued to believe and to persevere, right? With the faith that you were born to do this work. I believe ultimately that you were born to do this work as well. And you're in a moment of time where you are learning, you are developing, in some cases you are unlearning, right, ideas in order to become stronger and more effective in your role in the future. And so ultimately, my hope is that you'll continue to remember and reiterate for yourself that you were born to do this work. So those are some reflections that I think that Rita Pearson's message can transfer over into social work. Now, what I'd like to do is I'd like to move into one final activity with you all. This activity, if some of you have had me for other courses, you know where I'm going with it. If you haven't, I truly hope that you will take advantage of this opportunity because it is something that, for me, a professor did for me in my grad program, profoundly affected me. I've continued to do this throughout my teaching, and I have learned that it has profoundly impacted my students. And ultimately, that's what I pray for you in this program, that you will be impacted by your studies. And so here's our final activity. What I'm going to actually ask you to do is write a letter to yourself. I'm going to ask you to actually write a letter to yourself. And let me get an envelope because we're going to need an envelope as an example for this activity. So here's what we're going to do. In every course that I end with, at the end of the course, I do this activity. Every single course that I do, every single student that I teach, I end the course in this way. I'd like you to write a letter to yourself. And in that letter, I would like you to address these 4 questions. You have a couple of choices. In the letter, you can either choose to gather an envelope, just a regular letter envelope and a piece of paper. It doesn't need to be this long letter. You don't even have to type it out. In fact, it's better if you don't. If you just take a line, paper or any paper, and you write a letter to yourself addressing these 4 questions. What is your why in being a social worker? There's a Japanese proverb that says, we should not forget our beginner spirit. Our beginner spirit is the origin of our inspiration that led us, to make decisions for our future. What is your why behind being a social worker? When I sat in interviews with you all, when I met you, some of the questions that I asked you was, why? Why did you select social work? I also asked you, why did you select CBU? In those cases, you explained to me your why. So reflect on that. The second thing is name 1 or 2 memorable moments from this semester that you want to reflect on a year. It doesn't have to be related to this course. Maybe it was some inspirational moment from another professor. Maybe it was a profound conversation that you had with a friend, family, or colleague. Maybe it was a lecture that you attended. Maybe it was a difficult point that you overcame in your personal life. But take a snapshot of 2 things that were memorable for you in this semester and reflect on those. Put those down, okay, in the note. What was one takeaway from this course that you want to remember throughout your career? So as it pertains to case management, what was one little tidbit of information, right, that you learned that you want to take with you into your future career? And finally, what I'm asking you to do is write one message of encouragement for the future you, 1 year from now. Now, here's what I'm going to ask you to do. When you're done writing that letter, I'd like you to go ahead and fold it up and to put it into your envelope and seal the envelope. Another option that I'm going to give you is that you can also come into my office. I always keep paper and envelopes in my office. You can choose to do your letter then too, and you're more than welcome to do that, okay? What I'm asking you to do is you seal up the envelope, and what you're gonna do is write your address that you want the letter sent to right here in the middle of the envelope, okay? I know for some of us, it's been a minute since we have written a letter. So right here in the middle of the envelope. Now, consider if you have a plan on moving or you're not quite sure if you'll be in the same place in a year, think about a friend or family's address that you can send it to where you know they'll be there so you still get your letter. You don't need to pay for postage. I'm going to cover that for you. That's your tuition at work, okay? So I stamp these up. I do not read them. Please seal them. These letters are not for me. They're not attached to a grade. This is for you. And then go ahead and you can either slip them under my door in James 277 if you wish to. You can give them to me when you see me next, or you can arrange to meet me on campus and do that. You can leave them in my inbox in the office of CBSS. You can leave them with me. Once I get them, what's going to happen is 1 year from now, exactly 1 year from now, I am going to mail these out and you will get your letters and be able to open them again. Now, I'll mail these letters to you, and 1 year from now, think about it this way. You will then be preparing to enter the final semester of this program, okay? And so I think it's important, like I said, to stop and to reflect on how far you've come in this journey. And it's very special to see something in your own handwriting, taking you back to a moment in time that normally would be long forgotten in this process. And so I'd like to be able to do that final activity for you. Okay, couple of last things to reflect before we go into our centering. I want to leave you with one final bit of inspiration, a prayer, an actual prayer that comes from our Native American chief, Chief Tecumseh. Chief Tecumseh was a Shawnee chief. He was also a warrior that led several rebellions organized not only by the Shawnee, but involved with other tribes in opposition to settlement westward of the United States government. And so Chief Tecumseh lived his life according to a set of values, an ethos, if you will, of what he believed was imperative for how he should live his life, that motivated the direction and the pursuits that he carried out, right, when his time was here, right, on earth. And so I'd like to share this ethos with you. Everyone has an ethos. Rita Pearson had an ethos, right? Reverend King had an ethos. Gandhi had an ethos. Dietrich Bonhoeffer had an ethos. Mother Teresa had an ethos. This is the purpose, the sense of profound inspiration and values that guide us in our work every single day. And so I'd like to give you an example of a beautiful ethos to which Chief Tecumseh had written in his time. So let's reflect on this for a moment, and then I'd like you to consider what your ethos will be, right? So live your life that the fear of death can never enter your heart. Trouble no one about their religion. Respect others in their view and demand that they respect yours. Love your life. Perfect your life. Beautify all things in your life. Seek to make your life long and its purpose in the service of your people. Prepare a noble death song for the day when you go over the great divide. Always give a word or a sign of salute when meeting or passing a friend, even a stranger when in a lonely place. Show respect to all people and grovel to none. When you arise in the morning, give thanks for the food and for the joy of living. If you see no reason for giving thanks, the fault lies only in yourself. Abuse no one and no thing, for abuse turns the wise ones to fools and robs the spirit of its vision. When it comes your time to die, do not be like those whose hearts are filled with the fear of death, so that when their time comes, they weep and pray for a little more time to live their lives over again in a different way. Sing your death song and die like a hero going home. This is a beautiful example of what an ethos calls for. An ethos calls us to live our lives by a value system, not only for how we will treat ourselves, but how we will treat others throughout our lives. And so you don't have to come up with an answer today, but I would encourage you that as you move through this program, consider what is your ethos going to be, right? So finally, I'd like to close out with a centering activity, our final centering activity for the term. And I am super excited for this one. There's opportunities where scripture can provide guidance, inspiration, hope, right? And this is one of those scripture verses that provides celebration and honoring, right? The journey that you've come through. And so for our final scripture for this term, it comes from Numbers chapter 6, 24 through 26. Many of you are familiar, a blessing to you all that is often shared in joyful moments in life. And so the scripture verse reads, "The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace." And our focus word for today will be blessed. Blessed. You have come to the end of a very long journey. You have been blessed. It has not been easy. And I pray that as you continue through this program, that hopefully we'll meet again for another course. And I hope that the Lord has his face shine upon you and is gracious to you, right? And gives you peace. So I want to thank you all for a fantastic term. Let's go ahead and close out with our final centering exercises. Reflect on, be present with the fact that God is here, has led you to this point in your program, and you are blessed. And allow God to speak, being blessed into your heart. So take a nice deep breath. Close your eyes. Be present with God in this very moment, and I'll keep track of the time. Okay, go ahead and take that nice deep breath. Open your eyes, come on back. Folks, I really want to say thank you. I want to give you a clap. Congratulations. All right, I want to say thank you so much for the hard work, the dedication that you put in, and for, most importantly, investing in yourself so that you may be prepared to invest in others down the road. I wish you the absolute best. Feel free to email me. All right, even if the term's over, you can email me. I am here for you. I'm happy to meet with you, discuss, coordinate all of those good things. Know that even though the course is over, I am still going to continue to pray for you. I wish you all the best. I hope to see you again. All right, God bless. Good luck. Thank you all very much.